Europe builds, and it builds well.
We have the founders and the stories to prove it.
I'm Matilda Nathan, founder of Born.
And I'm Nikos Stathiou, journalist and author.
And together, we'll be co-hosting some of Europe's greatest founders.
Join us as we unfold their stories with candor and detail. We have today Michael Petychakis, and we have some news to share. As a journalist, I always have to code things with the breaking news. Current CTO of Dialectica, and just very recently left as the former CTO of ORFIUM, the global technology leader providing software, data, and licensing solutions to the entertainment industry. Michael has been involved in numerous research projects on topics related to artificial intelligence, robotics, future versions of the World Wide Web and the internet. So there's a lot of passion of technology. He's also transferred a lot of his knowledge and experience as a mentor to different startups. He also seems to have a superpower, which is that he's exceptionally good and knows very well the M&A space. So these are some of the things we're going to be talking about today. Michael, it's a huge pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for the very warm introduction. I love your podcast. So, I'm super glad to be here.
It was hard to introduce you because you've done a lot of things, actually. So the first question might even be the most challenging, but we always start by asking our founders to give us a bit of an elevator pitch. So let's say in 3 minutes or less, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you have built throughout the years?
Okay, I'm going to go with a very, very short introduction. So my story goes back when I was in school. I just wanted to do math. Unfortunately, I was very successful to the exams where we go to the university. So my parents said, okay, you have to either become a doctor, a medical doctor, or you have to become an engineer. So I joined the National Technical University of Athens as an electrical and mechanical engineer and computer engineer. I didn't like my university at all. I hated it. But then at the fourth year, I had my first AI course. We're now speaking almost 20 years ago. And I just fall in love with AI because AI, for the people who don't really know, it's just an amazing part of computer science, which is math at the end of the day. So I loved it. And then I started going into robotics. So I dropped out of the university, went to Dubai, worked there for a couple of years doing humanoid robots, Skynet stuff, and I fall so much in love with that I wanted really to delve into cognitive AI, how computers could feel, could think, have emotions, become friendly. So I returned back. I started, I onboarded on a PhD. On parallel, I did some startups. My first startup was Mooded. For 6 months. We had more users as a social network than Instagram. We launched more or less the same time. Obviously, the story of Instagram, you all know, then it was acquired by Facebook, blah, blah, blah. We couldn't afford the service back then. The ecosystem of funds wasn't just there. We're now in 2012. So I do my research. I become an academic. On parallel, I start a few startups, nothing successful. And then I realized that my academia background wasn't strong enough to give me some industry positions. So I started doing some freelancing. But the most pivotal moment was at the peak of my research when I had finalized. I went to a big conference, and over there I realized that there were no other academics. Everybody was from the industry. So I realized I have to go back to the industry. And at this point, I meet the original founders of ORFIUM, Chris and Drew, completely random coincidence. They were in LA. I was in Greece. Through a friend who happened to be in a party in LA. We meet. Nothing interesting back then. I wasn't really passionate about ORFIUM at this point. So Dimitris, my partner, and I, we started from here, and we're now in 2015. The referendum happens. Because I was an academic, the government back then took all the money from all the institutions, so we were not going to get paid for the next year. So we said, okay, we have to see and work on that Orpheum thing a little bit more seriously. So because of the referendum and because we were not going to get paid, we started working a startup. So that's how we started really investing our effort and time in Orpheum. A few other things happened, like an amazing coincidence to meet Rob, an ex-Universal executive, joined Orpheum and really exploded the growth of Orpheum. Many other things. We all worked very hard, very passionately. We started solving one problem after another. We scaled from 0 to today almost 800 people globally. And the entertainment industry, you all feel it, you all experience. So it was an amazing journey of 10 years for me. But now I've decided that I want to try something new, join Dialectica because they're in the information industry. So as you know, as I've already told you, actually, my background is on AI. So I really want to see what's going to happen. I think we'll live in a pivotal moment in history of tech and history of humanity. So I want to really absorb it.
It's quite like I really like software engineer or like engineer stories when you manage to actually turn your passion into a proper career. I find it you guys are very lucky to be able to do that.
I mean, as I keep telling to people, like my hobby, my passion is tech. Like when I'm not working, quote, because I don't see my work as work, I'm on Twitter or trying to understand what's on tech or writing code. I'm not a good coder. I just love hacking things together.
I just want to kind of understand how Michael thinks a bit better. So I want you to be a fly on a wall when you actually had to make a difficult decision, either for your professional life or for Orpheum per se. Like, how did you think about it?
So, okay, most people don't even know about this, but we started as a B2C. We were a competitor to SoundCloud, and we were trying to compete with Spotify. Okay, very naively, but we were talking 10 years ago. Spotify wasn't the company that it is today. Anyhow, so we started creating a platform. We had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of indie artists in our platform and millions of tracks. So we were growing as a B2C. Then Rob joins. He's a very interesting person. He was the first person to ever license music on Spotify, on YouTube. So like he's kind of a one-of-a-kind person. So after his career in Universal, after 25 years, he joined us. Like it's very common in the US to see people very senior joining startups. And then he said, guys, like, I love you. You're a fun tech team, but you don't understand the industry. Like the industry has serious problems to solve. So let's go and solve the enterprise problems. So for us, that we loved our platform. It was very hard to go from B2C to B2 enterprise. Like I would say it took us more than a year to digest what was going on, because we thought the B2 enterprise offerings that we were developing were the hobby, while the B2C was our core vision and platform. So we were putting all the energy to the B2C that were losing money, and we thought the hobby was the one that was really generating revenue. So it took us more than a year and a lot of difficult discussions, and for us to start going through a mental shift that, actually we're going to become a B2 enterprise company, and we're going to be offering enterprise services to the biggest clients in the industry, like the companies that you all know, from Universal to Sony to Warner to now Disney, Apple, everybody.
And were you in favor from the get-go? Or did you also personally took you a long time to make that shift in the way you were?
Yeah, it took me a long time, because B2C is always more fun. Regardless if it makes money or not, it's more fun. So, and you get addicted to people,
recognize your product.
Not only, but I'm going to talk about the hate posting that we were receiving, because like indie artists, they just wanted their music to become super popular, and they were blaming us, and we were trying to do everything to promote them. But now I realize that, it was also, we were very young at this point. Like Chris and Drew and myself, like we were 27 when we started. So like we were very young. We didn't have enough experience. So, but that passion, I think, was what brought us here. Like at the end of the day, it's all about passion and less about skills.
I think from your intro, it's about passion, but also I like that in everything you were telling us, you were sort of reactive and adaptive to a lot of things the universe was throwing, be it the referendum in Greece or be it, a very important network and connection you were getting. It seems like you were always looking for these signs and adapting and reacting to them to apply your passion, right?
Yeah, and that's actually my advice to all young people. So obviously, I live in Athens, and the last 10 days have been very packed with events. We have events from this organization, that organization, it's in fact. So I'm trying to attend most of those. And I met with a lot of young people, and they're asking my story, and I tell them, and they're like, "Oh, so what do you recommend?" I say, "Guys, just try to be open, attend events, meet with people, because you have to go to 1,000 meetings and 1,000 events to meet the one person that's going to change your life, and you're going to change their lives. But you have to be out there and embrace the craziness and the randomness."
I couldn't agree more, actually. And I had read once something that is called the pursuit of interestingness. And like many people, like including myself, I was thinking about my career in a very kind of linear way. And then at some point, I think at the age of 33, I read this article saying, okay, you actually should pursue interestingness and kind of try one thing that is going to be very different from what you've been used to or what you had planned for yourself. So I want to kind of shift gears a bit and move on to your passion, which is AI. And I would love to hear your kind of thoughts around, like, what are the AI applications that you're mostly passionate about, and kind of give us a couple of examples of what we should watch out for in the coming years.
I mean, okay, everybody talks about this. I don't have many more to add. Like, it's extremely interesting. The only thing that I would say that summarizing, yes, we're going to be living in a world of agents, and we're going to see a big shift on productivity, and we're going to have AI everywhere. And the way the big players position themselves, from Google to OpenAI and Cloud and stuff, they're becoming platforms. So we're going to see a new universe where we're going to have agents, and we're all going to be way more productive. Multimodality is going to be the key thing that we're going to be experiencing in the next couple of years, but that's something we expect. Technologically, what I think we're going to be seeing, one is going to be symbolic AI, how we ground truth, how we know what we've been told or what we've been recommended is the actual thing. So that's a field of AI that's been there for more than 30 years. That's where, I spent most of my PhD on. And now it's becoming way more relevant. It's a very, very interesting field, but we're heavy mathematics, so it's not very sexy for people, while LLMs are super fancy. And the other thing that we're going to be seeing are obviously the datasets. On last July, when Llama 3.1 was released, Zuckerberg said, okay, we trained it on all available human data that's public. So it's interesting that we've already reached the open data that we can find that humanity has ever produced up to this day. And we know that the private data that exists in companies is way, way more. So we're going to see a shift on how data is being monetized, how data is getting deployed, how we cultivate data, how we save data. It's going to be there's going to be big focus there, and we'll already see that. We see, Reddit is doing licensing deal, all the big from New York Times, and they're doing licensing deals. Obviously, Twitter was acquired to be the biggest data set in the world to train AI. We see that happening. So, and we're going to be seeing way more.
I think whenever I have someone who's been in AI for many years, I have to ask this question, because as happens with everything, then there's a hype moment, and it's hard for people to discern what's hype and what's substantial here, right? So I have two questions here because you've been in the field for a while. How was it before the sort of Gen AI bubble to be integrating AI into products and entrepreneurship? And what's, you think, the most overhyped aspect of AI today that people should be wary of and say, these are the limitations, but we're not there yet?
So obviously in today's Gen AI hype, there's a lot of substance. Like, okay, even though we were in the space, we didn't really see that coming at this scale and at this magnitude. All of us, and actually ORFIUM is a really good example of an algorithmic company, a data company. We were always producing algorithms to serve our clients, and we've been using all the AI technologies that's been available. The innovation that happened with Gen AI, with LLMs, we were already using it, we were already adopting it, but nobody really saw the release of ChatGPT because we were playing with the Gen AI models. We just didn't thought of those use cases and how powerful it could be. So it's interesting. It's not for everything though. Like once somebody understands the capabilities of those models, they need to understand the limitations. For example, like it's not definitive, but like high-level LLMs are really good for broad tasks, but they're going to be 90% on precision and accuracy, while a deep learning model, it's going to be like 99. But a 99% accuracy, precision, F-score, whatever we call it, it's going to be great, but it's going to solve a very, very specific task. While the trade-off now is that I have 90% accuracy, which is great for most tasks because, with the human overseeing, we can solve that. But like it's going to be for a wide category of things.
You joined ORFIUM and you said now you're more than 800 people, which I'm guessing a big part of this is...
A little bit less, but yeah. Okay.
A bit less, okay. But it's like you have probably a big part of this is your tech team. How did you approach scaling? Because you went how big is the tech team today?
I would say almost 200 people.
Okay.
Almost, yeah, it's a little bit less.
Uh-huh. Kind of any insights around how you kind of went about scaling and anything, like any practical tips on...
Yeah, so, okay. The only rule of thumb I can give is that every 6 months, it's a different team. I had to be a different manager. I had to learn new skills. I had to really go through mentorship myself. Like I had to really understand what was happening. So over the years, I had amazing mentors, I had amazing advisors. I was really trying to recalibrate and repurpose myself for every single stage. And I was all in. It was not a job. And I think when you're really going through that, you're either there or not, and it has to be 100% you. And as I keep saying to a lot of, the people I've been working with, it like going through the journey takes part of your soul. So that's something you cannot take back. So you have to be really willing to give that. Like you cannot get paid for that. You either want to do it or not. So like you have to be all in. The more technical skills, as I said, like mentors, advisors, courses, anything. Like, okay, we're talking about Greece being a small ecosystem. I had all the help in the world from the ecosystem to help me grow.
And just one last follow-up question on this. Did at any point you felt, okay, the scale is too big for me? I feel I want to go back to much earlier stage because I actually feel uncomfortable at this kind of scale. It's not what I enjoyed doing. That was not what I signed.
Many times. Especially when scaling started, when we went from being a team of 5 people to being a team of 20. It was very uncomfortable because I was writing code and I thought I could do both. I went through all the traditional shifting from pure engineer to an engineering manager. Like that was one of my most difficult decisions. Like, what do I want to do? But actually, the only reason why I made this decision to shift to a manager was because I was the worst coder from our team. Like we were a good team of developers. I was the worst. So I said, okay, like I'm stepping back, guys, for you. Yeah.
Another dimension of the team scaling up that I'm really interested by is the idea that it's sort of rooted in Greece, right? Not just in Europe, but in Greece. So I'm wondering, to what extent was that sort of a strategic pillar for your expansion? And since we are in this sort of optimistic setting of Europe builds, right, highlighting some of the strengths we have here, were there any competitive advantages in building your team from this part of the world?
Yeah, so let's go back to 2015. So we have the referendum. All of our colleagues are flying from Greece to work abroad. So at this point, we were one of the few companies that we were hiring in Greece. So we were giving an alternative. Okay, you can do deep tech and you can do it from Greece and have a decent salary. So we were one of the few options. So we were getting top talent. So that was a competitive advantage that was going on up till, I would say, 2020. 2020, as Matilda said, we have many more funds, way more startups, like the ecosystem starts thriving. So salary wasn't so much of a competition anymore, because a lot of people still call me and say, "Oh, Michael, we want to have a base in Athens. Is it cheaper?" I say, "Yeah, it's cheaper from London, but not much cheaper from anywhere else. You shouldn't approach Greece as a cheaper location because at the end of the day, you're only going to save 20%, which is not much when you include taxes, subsidies, blah, blah, blah. As a company, when you're making your planning, there are so many variables. But Greece has some interesting characteristics because people who really want to have an impact, don't have as many choices, you can find those people and you can work with them and you feel it. So, and I would say because I've worked with now, as ORFIUM, we're in many, many different countries, I understand how people are passionate. Well, in other locations, I just see people are more mercenaries. Okay, I'm getting a salary. I'm a great, developer, because they've been through big tech, they have different skill set, but they don't have the same mindset of just really want to get things through the line or being so much passionate about the vision that you're offering, for example.
Is it the same in the US, like what you're actually saying now? So is it people that are less passionate, you feel?
Depends. We don't have developers in the US.
Okay.
We had a few that they were very early from the journey, so they were, very passionate as well. One main difference that I see is that in the US, they're going to come for lower salary, but they really appreciate stock options. While in Greece, we've been through a huge journey to educate them on stock options, and we still see employees who, after 3-4 years, they leave the company, they don't get their stock options. I'm like, guys, it's a tiny, yes, you have to pay legally for your stock options, but it's a tiny percentage. So just get it. You never know. But yeah, in Greece, people don't appreciate that. They appreciate the good environment. They appreciate the vision. They appreciate the salaries, the other perks, private insurance or whatever else you give them, but not the stock options, which is really funny.
Actually, I find it funny too. It's they like the tangible stuff.
Yeah.
What has value today?
They need to see it today in front of them.
Yeah, but also, guys, we're not a deep ecosystem. We don't have history.
Yeah.
If you if you exclude Viva and Beat, there are not as many people out there who have made exits to tell the story. So since there are not as many stories, it's hard for people to connect with that.
My most interesting topic of the conversation today, because it's something that I haven't lived scaling. I've lived in many different companies, but it's the M&A side of things, which I think you guys have done a few, and it's not as common in the Greek market. Okay, so ORFIUM is engaged in different strategic acquisitions such as SoundMouse. And I would like to get, for people that are listening to this podcast, kind of some key factors you consider when evaluating the different M&A opportunities and some more practical tips around valuation, terms, etc.
So we've been through 2 We've completed 2, but obviously, completing 2 means that you've evaluated tens more. So I've been through the process for many, many years to successfully complete 2. One was very easy because it was a business outpost in Japan, and we then gave them specific goals. They had to really become a business outpost. So, it wasn't a big difference. There was a big difference, in terms of branding, marketing, eating, and also, include those people. But the biggest M&A experience for me was the one with Soundmouse, because at this point, it was a similar sized company in terms of people. So merging those 2, for example, I had to manage, one day I had a department of 100 tech people, and next day I had 200 people that I never met before, for example. So it was just too much at the beginning. It was extremely stressful, but I followed my, similar approach. I started speaking with advisors. I started speaking with people. I was trying to understand what was coming for me. Even before that, a guy was in my office a couple of days ago, and he saw that it was stacked over there, M&A for Dummies. So he said, "Michael, did you actually read that book and then made the M&A?" I said, "Guys, I had to start from somewhere."
That's where you start.
Yeah, you start from the M&A from Dummies. It's not an advertisement to the book, but it was a good book. It started giving me, insights, for example, about culture. Before you buy somebody, there has to be a culture fit. What does this mean? Okay, taking them out for dinner, see how they behave, like the leaders. If you're like-minded people, all those things. So yeah, I can talk about the M&A, especially with Soundmouse, for hours, from cultural, how you make the decision to make an M&A. Okay, because, through the diligence, you're going to find things that are not amazing, or they're not exactly the way you'd like them. Or then you're starting about attrition. Okay, when people get acquired, maybe they start thinking about attrition. There are too many variables, and how long are you going to give until the transformation happens, the merger happens? What's going to happen to your core business? Because then you have the most senior leadership that was running the core business being a bit distracted, because you now have to integrate another company. Do you make a common offering? Do you have common branding? All those things that you have to really think, the common messaging, everything changes. One of the most stupid things that I have to do was integrate the Google Suite into one. I had 2 Google Suites, and I had to make them one, because there was no way to start chatting, from one to another. So we had to integrate them. So how do you do that? We went to Google. Google helped us, and that took 3 months, for example. I'm just talking about tiny things.
On the point of tech, because that's very interesting, right? Aligning different tech, both in terms of the talent, also in terms of the infrastructure. What are some tips on doing that? Because that's a space I haven't heard enough about. I've heard some stuff about managing the teams and the dinners you were talking about before for dummies. But when it comes to the tech, what's sort of the direction there?
A really interesting question, because at this point I was thinking, okay, now I'm a CTO, I have different stacks, completely different priorities. What is my tech strategy? What do I say to my people that now they belong to teams with completely different phases of the roadmap? Some products were extremely mature, where some were very early. Some were really deep on their tech debt, while some others were brand new. So how can I make a common tech strategy? So it took me a while. I was speaking with all the leaders and started creating a more generic tech strategy that was around people, around cloud, around bringing efficiencies, because all efficiency in the way we work, because AI was just around the corner, so we could see the new tooling coming up. So that's how I started. And then we started applying those generic rules that were coming out of the strategy to the corresponding products. So we started feeling like a common tech department, because we had a strategy that was affecting everybody.
I really like that response. It's definitely a lot of food for thought. I would just like us to go back one step in the actual acquisition, again, back to the technology question. How did you evaluate whether kind of the technology was A, good enough, 2, what you needed at this given stage? So like the tech due diligence, how did you approach that?
Okay, very, very practically, we created a squad. We went to the London office. We went there for a week to meet the people, spend time. Then we started requesting access to everything. We started reviewing, asking questions, doing that. And then that lasted, like we went physically for a week. And then for the next month, we were continuing doing diligence. Like the squad was only dedicated on that. And then we made a report that was shared with the rest of the executive team and the board. We were talking about the good things, the red flags, the worries that we're having. So everything was there because everyone is going to have the red flags. We put everything there very bluntly because when you make such a transaction, you have to know all the risks that come with that.
And did you feel like you were kind of spot on, or did after the acquisition things came up that actually you hadn't expected to?
So regarding the good things, yes, we knew what the good things were. And regarding the red flags, we knew that we didn't have enough time to explore specific areas, but we knew there were going to be even more red flags in this area. So we knew there were things that we were going to hate. Some things appeared that were even worse, but we already knew those areas were problematic and that they were flagged even on the due diligence. But obviously, you don't have the time to go. We're talking about the company of 20 years, and we only had almost a month to actually do a proper tech diligence. Because, before that, you just flirt, you exchange ideas, everything is fine. But when the actual due diligence starts, it's more uncomfortable from both parties.
Amazing. That's a lot of insight on the technology side of the M&A process. And would love to kind of close the session of today with a simple question. And I'm sure you've experienced both. So I would love to hear your opinion. So are you more afraid of success or failure?
And to add a quick comment here, I really liked in the introduction where you said, I tried a couple of things at first, many of them didn't fly. We don't hear that a lot in Europe, right? This is a more American approach to entrepreneurship, like fail forward, fine tune your idea. So I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about whether you're more afraid of success or failure in the end.
So that's something, I keep saying to almost every podcast when they invite me. And whenever young people ask me, just don't be afraid of failure. Like, failure is a natural thing, even when you go for a run, like, okay, if you wanted to do a pace of 5 and you're only doing 5:30, sorry, like runners will get that. But anyway, like, okay, you're going to fail at almost every aspect of your life. Like if you're trying to be a perfectionist, you're not going to go anywhere. So by not being afraid to fail and make that part of the process, and I failed massively. Especially, during the M&A process, I experienced, failure in so many different aspects. Personal failure, where I wanted to do something and it was the wrong thing to do because I just didn't have the experience. So, no, I'm not going to say, being afraid of success or failure, no, because my especially last 10 years have been so intense and I've been through the roller coaster of startups. So like you just live with that. Like one day you're extremely successful and one day you're the biggest failure in the world. So yeah, but I, say to everybody, and especially young people, don't be afraid of failure. I see young people all the time where they want to send their CV to big tech or the big four. Because they're afraid that if they start something and they fail, that's going to be very embarrassing for their parents to see, for their friends to see, or if they join a startup and the startup closes in 6 months. It's fine. When I was recruiting my first employees in ORFIUM, I said, guys, I only have 3 months of salaries, but I'm going to do my best to expand that horizon. But I cannot promise you any more than 3 months. So if we fail, yes, I'm going to give you a few salaries to find another job. And that's how we started back in 2017 when we started hiring external people.
Like that's a very grounded and kind of realistic way to approach it.
And because, Nico, you said about the American way, I'm lucky enough, to spend so much time early in my career with use people, understand how they think. Initially, we were thinking more in the European way, big roadmaps, very predictable outcomes. And they were like, no, let's try this, let's try the other. And it was really against my DNA. But then I started understanding the benefits.
Absolutely. But I will say I really like you ending on that note, because I do see a mentality shift in Europe, in Greece as well, in the Greek tech scene, of us moving to that direction a little bit more. So it's coming at a good time to nudge people even more. Thank you, Michael. Excellent discussion. From a party in LA and a referendum in Greece to building a real global tech leader, and now moving on to your next steps. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on AI, on mergers and acquisitions, on scaling tech teams. Super insightful.
Guys, thank you very much. By the way, our ORFIUM story, now I realize it's not unique. More startups went through that phase during the referendum. Dialectica is one of those. It's just common, people who we were really worried that we were not having a future, and we wanted to really, really do something. So, yeah, it's not that uncommon. But guys, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure meeting both of you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Europe Builds, where we show that the European ecosystem is no longer an underdog story.
If you like our episode and want to hear more, follow Europe Builds on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Born's YouTube channel.